few users in the comments have reached out and have had issues with their local internet service providers blocking all ports into their home network, making it impossible to reach the feeder website outside of their home network, since port forwarding will not work and is being blocked by their ISP. As a workaround to this, I've come up with a quick way to be able to trigger a feeding without having access to your Pi web server remotely. The solution is to set up a Google Spreadsheet on your personal Google account, and after some initial configuration, which this video details, there is a checkbox which you can check any time you would like to do a feeding on the spreadsheet. The feeder software is then checking every 5 minutes or whatever time interval you have configured on your feeder, and if the checkbox is checked, a feeding occurs. The feeder software also is updating the latest feed times onto the spreadsheet as well for easy access. Since the feeder is going outside your home network to check a Google spreadsheet, no port forwarding is needed, and this is a viable option in case your ISP blocks all ports. If you have any better suggestions on how to do this, please let me know in the comments below, but the rest of this quick tutorial will show you how to set up the spreadsheet itself as well as the feeder software to be able to do these updates. So just as a quick recap, this tutorial is really meant for those who are unable to access the websites remotely because port forwarding is blocked by their ISP. If your port forwarding isn't blocked, you're still welcome to continue ahead with this tutorial if you wish. The only thing to point out before we get started is that this tutorial is based off of the previous video of upgrading to Python 3. If you're still running on Python 2 from the original video, go ahead and do the previous video and upgrade your Python to version 3. Also, if you've previously set this up prior to the Python 3 documentation, you'll also want to update your Git to include the latest config settings. If you haven't done that yet, don't worry, further on in the tutorial I will point out the section where you can go ahead and paste the updated values. And as always, the written directions are linked in the link below the video, and you'll want to use the written directions and this video as a companion piece with one another. The video is kind of to supplement the written instructions to make clear any parts that are missing, and the written instructions will always be kept up to date. So with that, let's continue on with the first step of setting up the Google API. Okay, the first step we want to do is from either the Pi itself or from another computer, go to consoles.developers.google.com, and you want to log in with the Google account that you'll be using. So that's console.developers.google.com, and when you finally log in, you'll get to the main screen and you'll hit the create button on the right hand side for a new project, and you'll want to give this project name basically whatever you want. It's not super important. So right here I'm just going feeder spreadsheet, and you can leave no organization unchecked and click create. And once that's done creating, we'll need to enable some APIs for the actual project to use. So for this case, we will search for Google Sheets and enable the Google Sheets API. And then we will also go ahead and enable the Google Drive API. Those are the two APIs that we will need for this project itself. And to get back to the main API screen, you can just click on the navigation on the side and go back to the main page and click back on the Enable APIs button, and then search for Google Drive and also enable that API. And once that's enabled, then we're going to need to create a user that the service can use to talk to our spreadsheet via the Google API. So you'll see there is a notification about needing to create credentials. So go ahead and click on Create Credentials, and you can just select the Google Drive API for the top one. The credentials will work with both. And then for calling the API from, you'll want to click on Other Non-UI, cron job daemon, click Application Data. You'll click No to using the App Engine or Compute Engine, and then click on What credentials do I need. And then we'll create a service account for the API to use. So for the service account name, we could call it Pet Feeder Service, and then under Role we can select Project Editor, and then leave the key type as JSON and click continue, at which point a JSON file will be downloaded locally. And once that JSON file is downloaded, as you can see, you'll want to open it up on your machine. And the first thing we'll want to do is to go ahead and right click on it and rename it. And we'll want to rename it to something that is already pre-programmed into our feeder service called Google API Secret. And then within that JSON itself, there'll be a client email address that you'll want to copy. So you'll want to go ahead and edit that or open it and copy that email address, the client email address. I won't show you mine here just for privacy concerns, but once you copy that client email, you'll want to go ahead and log into Google Sheets on your personal Google account and then create a new blank document. And once that document is up, we'll want to give it a specific name. So up at the top we can change untitled spreadsheet and we can rename that as pet feeder times. And you can change that again, but that's what's hard coded currently into the feeder service, and you can leave it at that, or you can change it later in the config file. And once that's done, you'll want to share this file with the account that we copied earlier out of the JSON document. So mine's pet feeder service at that long address, and then you'll want to allow them to edit the file, that service, and then you can uncheck notify people if you want, or not. Otherwise, there's no email address for that account, so you might get an error from Google saying that email address doesn't exist. But once that is shared, then we can go ahead and actually set up the spreadsheet itself. So once that's done, in cell 1A, you'll want to type in trigger feeding, and then in cell B1, you'll want to go to insert and insert a checkbox, and then into cell A3, we'll want to type in latest feed times. And after that, we'll want to head back over to the Pi if you aren't already on the Pi, and go back into our main home directory where we currently have the feeder set up, which is under var www feeder feeder. And then within there, we're going to want to paste that JSON file that we previously downloaded. Now, if you're already on the Pi and you downloaded it into your download folder, you can just copy it over to here. But if you're on another machine like myself, then you'll want to have to go ahead and create that file. So you can open up a console in this folder itself, and then you can just select and type in touch Google API secret.json, which will just create an empty file in this directory. Then you can exit out of that and then go ahead and paste the full contents of that JSON file that you downloaded into this directory. Now again, I'm not going to paste the full thing in here just so you don't see my secret keys and whatnot. So you want to keep this file pretty secret. And then, so I'll just paste in a few lines just to show you, but you'll want to paste in the whole thing. And then once that's done, you'll want to save the file and exit out of the notepad. And then the next thing we'll want to do is to go ahead and enable some extra services that are needed by the service to be able to get the APIs talking to Google directly. Okay, before we go ahead with adding the additional Python services needed to get the spreadsheet working, a lot of you may not have upgraded your software since the updated changes for this has been added to the Git repository. So we'll just want to go ahead and update the software real quick to make sure that everything is up to date and has all the necessary software for this to get this working correctly. So to do that, from our var www feeder feeder folder, we can open up the console terminal again, and we'll want to go ahead and do get pull origin master. And if yours is out of date, it will show some of the files that are being updated. You'll see mine's already up to date, so it didn't pull any changes down. But if yours did have changes, it'll update some of the files. And then in addition to that, we'll have to update the app config. So go ahead and open that up in a text editor. And if you were following the original document directions prior to this being uploaded to Git, you might not have this last line, which is spreadsheet _file_name equals pet feeder times. You want to go ahead and type that line in exactly into the file itself, and then go ahead and save the app config, and then exit out. And those should be the only updated changes you need. And from that, we can go ahead and actually begin installing the additional software that is needed for the service to get this working. But that's just a quick check. If you have everything up to date and have done this project since this update has been pushed, then you should be good to go. But that is just a quick check for those who don't have those additional features, to make sure you go ahead and pull that down, or you're going to have issues moving forward. So let's go to the next step, as promised, and begin downloading the additional Python services needed. So to enable these Python services for the feeder service, we'll want to go ahead within our var www feeder folder and open up a new console window. And then from with there, we can command back down to var www feeder, and then go ahead and activate our virtual environment with source bin /activate, and you'll see feeder is in front of the console line now. And then we'll want to go ahead and do a pip install gspread formatting, and then OAuth services. And these are various Python packages that are needed to be able to talk with the spreadsheet itself and be able to add data to it. So let those go ahead and get installed by the Python installer. And once those are done, we can go ahead and close out this window or clear it. And then at this point, we'll want to go ahead and restart the feeder time service, which should already be set up at this point if you followed the previous video instructions. You could also go onto the admin page and also stop and start the service from there. But since we're already here at this point, we can just open up a console, and from within any directory, just go to sudo service feeder time service stop, and then once that's stopped, we can go ahead and restart it again. And at this point, it should stop and start with no issues if it's been running fine before. If there are any issues, you can go into the directory var www feeder under logs, and under the feeder time service log, there should be some output if you run into any issues. And of course, if there is any issues, please let me know below in the comments, and I can try and help you out where I can. So once we stop the service, we can go ahead and start it again. And at this point, everything should be working. We can just go ahead and in the next steps, we'll just test it to make sure it's working. And then I'll also show you how to modify some of the config files, such as the file name, in case you want to name your file something different. But once that's done, like I said, you can also check the logs to see if there's any issues before going on to the next step of modifying the config. So basically, to modify any configs, we'll want to open up the config file under feeder app.config, and the new config at the bottom is called spreadsheet file. And if you'll recall earlier, we set the spreadsheet name to pet feeder times. If for some reason you wanted that to be called something different, then here you'd change it to whatever the new spreadsheet name is in your Google Docs, and then restart the service. And then after that, we can go ahead and actually try testing it. So if we open up the actual spreadsheet itself, click the button, then every 5 minutes or so, the last time should be updated. If you wanted to check more than every 5 minutes, you'll go into the app config, and under seconds delay between schedule checks, change that value from 300 to something lower, and then go ahead and restart the service. Just keep in mind that'll also update the feeder itself to check more than 500 seconds for the screen to update should you have one. So then after that, you should be all set. In the future, if you want to trigger feeding, you could just go into this spreadsheet from your mobile device or from another desktop or anywhere outside the network, and then go ahead and click on trigger feeding and that button. And as you could see in the demo, once that feeding occurs, it'll uncheck the box and it'll update the latest feed times. If the box isn't checked, it'll also run every 5 minutes and update the latest feed time. So you can always go into this spreadsheet just to see when the last feed times were in and of itself. So that's about it. Like I said, if you have any other questions, please leave those in the comments below, and I'll do my best to try and answer those.